Good morning and welcome to the next installment of Advanced English Composition for Friday morning. Just to review, we've talked a little bit last time about the course, and I will have more to say a bit later about the course and course materials. There is a handout on writing process, which we discussed last time. We'll talk a little bit more about some of that today and writing strategies. As I mentioned, there is a Google form number 1 for you to do. This is some survey questions and personal info questions for you to fill out. Try to do that by in early next week. I haven't set an exact due date, I think. There is a second Google form about the writing process. You should have done it after the last class video. And there will probably be another short Google form after today's lesson on writing strategies. All of this is going to lead to a reflective self-evaluation essay on your writing process, and I'll give you the details of that assignment a little bit later, perhaps next week. So, last time we talked about the process of getting started on your papers, brainstorming and organizing techniques, especially outlining is a very helpful technique, and maybe along with other techniques that you might use, and the process of revising papers. We talked some about some of the problems that students typically have in writing, and these problems are true for native English speakers who are college students in North America, or people like you who are writing in English as your second language. These are universal problems for any college student. Probably true for you writing in your first language. If you're writing a paper in Korean in your first language, in Korean or Chinese, probably true if you study in college. Take writing courses or other courses where you have to do a writing assignment. These are universal problems. Just to review, I'm going to kind of cut to a video that I made earlier for a different class, a previous class, and it kind of summarizes some of the problems that we talked about last time in a slightly different way. So we'll do this as kind of a review and recap of some of the points we talked about last time. So, you have problems maybe with writing assignments or other assignments in school. It's probably not because you're lazy. It's probably not because you're undisciplined, necessarily. I would say there are probably deeper issues with your learning strategies, or even more likely with your motivation problems. But there could be other reasons too. So we'll talk about these today. First, a lot of students in college have maybe more informational or thematic problems when it comes to papers, though. Let's talk about these first. A lot of times when a professor gives you an assignment, the assignment is actually intentionally kind of broad, and it's up to you as a student to identify maybe a more specific angle or aspect or subpoint to talk about in your paper. But students assume that I need to write about the whole topic, which is probably not doable. The topic itself could probably be an entire book. Let's say your professor tells you to write a paper about the 30 Years' War. You could write a whole book about that. It's up to you as a student to identify a particular angle or aspect to write about. Maybe one that's interesting to you. Turn it into a learning exercise for yourself. A lot of times students have problems with not enough information, and you're overwhelmed. The topic is too big, or you don't know enough about the subject and you need to get more information. Or you have maybe too much information and some of it's not relevant. Occasionally, topic may be a little too specific. Maybe you've chosen a topic that's just too specific and you don't know what to do with it, where to go. So maybe you need to define your topic a little bit more broadly, or find more information about it. But more often, it's a topic that's too broad, and you need to narrow it, or you need to get more information so that you know how to manage the topic. Or you need to get rid of information that is distracting and extraneous. A lot of times college students have these kinds of informational topical problems. So that's your first stage. If you're having a problem with writing a paper, is it this kind of informational or topical issue? The topic is too broad, too specific, too much, too little information. Students often have problems with procrastination, putting things off to the last minute, and problems with writer's block. You're writing and you just get stuck and you don't know how to go on from there. And again, it's not necessarily because you're lazy or a bad student. It's maybe due to deeper motivational problems, like and some of the writing strategies we talked about before. It could be related to this. So let's talk about motivation. Okay, so hopefully that was helpful, kind of summarize things in a slightly different way. Now I want to go a little more into psychology today. I kind of like psychology. I want to talk about your writing motivation, because these could underlie your successes or problems in writing. Talk about the following questions. Maybe get with a classmate through video chat, phone chat, whatever. Talk about these questions for a few minutes. When you write, are you focused on learning something new? You maybe look forward to learning something new about the topic that you're writing about, or at least expressing your ideas successfully? Are you mainly focused on just getting a good grade? I just want to get a good grade on it. You do what you need to do to get a good grade. Is that your main focus? Or are you just focused on getting it done? I just want to get this thing done, get it over with. I don't really like this. I just want to do it and finish it. Does your motivation depend on the particular kind of assignment or the course or the subject matter? Pause the video, talk about these questions for a few minutes. So when it comes to writing, what is your motivation and what is it like? A lot of people think when it comes to learning something, oh, I just need more motivation. Not exactly true, because in psychology we know that there are different kinds of motivation and some are better than others. So when it comes to writing papers, I want you to now talk to each other about these questions about motivation. Do you feel like you have what we call an internal or intrinsic motivation? That means you do something because you want to, whether it's you're writing a paper or taking a particular class or doing a particular major. Are you doing it because you want to, out of personal desire, intellectual interest, personal interest, social interest of some kind perhaps? Or do you do it because you have to? You do something because you have to. It's just a requirement. You don't want to do it, but you have to. Or you have to get good grades, you have to get test scores, for getting a job, or maybe it's for meeting someone's expectations. Maybe it's about meeting someone else's expectations, expectations of your parents, your family, your friends maybe, or yourself. Maybe you have expectations of yourself that you're trying to satisfy. Is it out of those reasons? So maybe it's not looking dumb. I don't want to look dumb. I don't want my friends to think I'm dumb. I don't want my family to think I'm dumb. Or I want people to think I'm smart, I'm successful. Maybe that's it. Those are not really from inside you. Those are from kind of things from outside of you, even if you've made them kind of internal. But it's not really the thing itself. It's not about learning itself. So pause the video and talk for a few minutes. What is your motivation when it comes to writing assignments? And again, it may depend on the kind of writing assignment or the kind of class that you're taking. If it's different for different classes, okay, talk about those differences. What's it like in this class or that class? Pause the video and discuss. Okay, now let's go a little bit deeper. If your motivation is more internal or external, for certain classes or certain assignments, how does that affect your study habits? How are your study habits in a class where you're internally motivated or a class where you're externally motivated? Or a writing assignment where you feel your motivation is internal, oh, I really like this, or external, I don't really want to do this, but I have to. How does that affect your writing process or your overall study habits? Do you study effectively in this class or that class? Also, are you a perfectionist? So 완벽주의 is perfectionism. Are you a perfectionist? How does that affect your study habits or how you write? And do you think that perfectionism is a good thing? Is it healthy? What do you think? A lot of people brag and say, oh, I'm a perfectionist. Is it really healthy? Is it good? Do you think so? Talk about it for a while. Okay, so let me just go through the types of motivation again. There's internal motivation, you learn because you want to. There's external motivation, you learn because you have to. And actually, perfectionism is kind of an extreme type of external motivation. You're motivated by meeting someone's expectations. It might be someone else's expectations, it often is. Or you want people to think you're smart, or you want people to think you're not dumb, you're not bad at English, or you're a good student. Or these might be expectations that you have internalized, you've made them your own, but maybe they're not realistic. Are your expectations of yourself realistic when it comes to writing or when it comes to studying or doing your major? Are your expectations, your academic expectations, realistic? Where did they come from? There's also a neutral motivation, which is kind of in between, and you might have this towards writing or towards English. You learn something because you find it useful for something else. So what is your motivation toward learning English? Is your motivation toward studying English internal or external? If you're an English major, maybe it's internal, but maybe it's external. It's quite possible that you chose English for externally motivated reasons. But for some of you, it might be this kind of neutral or instrumental motivation where English is an instrument or a tool for something else. And this is also pretty healthy too. You can guess that internal motivation is healthy. Neutral motivation is also fairly healthy too. It's, so when it comes to English, maybe it's like, I don't hate it, I don't like it, kind of neutral, but it's a useful tool because I'm interested in something else. And English is just a tool for me to learn something else. Maybe you're interested in business. You want to work in business, and English is a useful tool for you for learning about business and the business world. You don't mind it. You don't have any feelings, good or bad. It's just a useful tool for you. Or you're into science, and English is a good tool for you to learn about science or politics or the news or whatever you're interested in. It's just a useful tool. So pause the video again for a minute and discuss what's your motivation like for English, learning English in general. Now I'm going to cut to another video. This is another older video where I give an explanation of these types of motivation, how these might affect your study habits or even your writing process. Students often have problems with procrastination, putting things off to the last minute, and problems with writer's block. You're writing and you just get stuck and you don't know how to go on from there. And again, it's not necessarily because you're lazy or a bad student. It's maybe due to deeper motivational problems, like and some of the writing strategies we talked about before. It could be related to this. So let's talk about motivation. You may have been told, oh, you need more motivation to study. Well, yes and no. There are actually healthy kinds of motivation and unhealthy kinds of motivation. What you have to do is understand the healthy kind and the unhealthy kind and the pitfalls of the unhealthy kind, because what you need is not just more, but better quality motivation. So we'll talk about that. The first kind of motivation that psychologists talk about when it comes to learning is intrinsic or internal motivation. This is the student who likes to learn. So if you like writing a paper in a particular course, you have an intrinsic motivation toward writing or toward the topic or the course. And that's actually a very good thing. You are more likely to enjoy it because, well, frankly, you're interested in it. You have an intrinsic motivation. It's called internal because it's your own choice. It's within you. It's entirely within you. So, for example, you have a personal interest, an intellectual interest, or a social interest in the topic that you're learning. And because of that, you feel like it's your choice. You have a sense of choice or autonomy, as psychologists call it, in the matter. I'm learning this because I want to. At least I feel like I want to. And that's autonomy in learning. And that's a great thing when you can feel that. And when you have that kind of sense of I'm doing this because I want to, when you learn, as you learn, you get this sense of improvement, a sense of growth. And this sense of growth or achievement or even mastery, it feels great. You feel like, oh, I'm learning something. I'm getting better at this. Or I've mastered this, at least to some degree. And you feel good about yourself. This sense of growth or achievement feeds your self-esteem, and it makes you like it even more. And also for some students, a sense of social connection may also be a third factor. Autonomy, sense of growth, and maybe social connectedness, maybe from forming friendships with your classmates, or maybe you're learning a language and you hope someday to be a part of that culture and that language community. There's a sense of social connection, and for some people that's an important thing too. But especially the sense of autonomy and growth. When you have that, you have an internal or intrinsic motivation. And when you have that intrinsic motivation, your study habits are much better because you are really interested in understanding the material, the contents. Deeper conceptual learning, not just memorizing facts, but a deeper conceptual learning. When it comes to writing, you are interested in writing and learning from the writing task, the writing exercise. You have a sense of interest in it. And that's a successful student. When you are intrinsically motivated, you are also maybe outside of class thinking about the materials, the contents, so you can understand it better. You're rehearsing it in your head. And you're maybe seeking sources of more learning outside of class, reading up on the topic. If it's a language, maybe you're seeking out media materials or something to read in the language or something to watch or listen to improve the language. If it's writing, maybe you like writing on your own. That's intrinsic motivation. And students with that motivation go for deep learning, and they are the better, more effective students, and they do better. Can you be intrinsically motivated toward all of your school subjects? No, probably not. That's not realistic. For some things, you may have a more neutral motivation, which we'll talk about later, or even a negative motivation. So let's talk about the negative motivation, because this is often the source of procrastination and writer's block and other poor study habits. The next major kind of motivation is what psychologists call extrinsic motivation or external motivation, meaning it's from outside of you. It's not really your own desire. It's imposed upon you from outside somehow. In this case, maybe you're learning something or you're writing a paper or you're taking a class, but you have no sense of interest in the contents or materials. No personal or intellectual interest. You don't feel like it's your choice. It's something you have to do. It's an obligation or duty or a source of stress or pressure. You don't get a sense of growth from it, and it doesn't make you feel good about yourself, especially when you keep doing poorly and getting poor grades in the topic. So for you, it's a source of stress or pressure or obligation. And why are you doing it? You have to. It's obligation. And ultimately because for you, there's maybe some kind of reward. So you're not learning for the purpose of learning itself. You're seeking some other reward, maybe maybe not such a tangible reward, not like money or anything. Well, maybe what you're focused on is just surviving the class, or getting good grades, getting good test scores, getting into a good university, getting into a good graduate school, but you're not really interested in learning this stuff itself. You're trying to get something else with it. Or maybe you want to get a good job, so money is maybe a thing, but you're not really interested in learning this language or this math or this history itself for the sake of learning. And maybe you're trying to avoid punishment. And it could be more non-tangible kind of punishment. It could be bad grades, bad scores, not getting into a good college, pressure, criticism from your parents or your teachers. You're trying to avoid looking or feeling dumb. I don't want to think I'm dumb. I don't want my friends to think I'm dumb. I don't want my parents or teachers to think I'm dumb. I don't want my parents to criticize me or get angry at me for getting a C in this class. Something like that. You're avoiding some kind of punishment or negative outcomes. You're not really interested in learning. So your approach to studying tends to be superficial. You focus on facts, factual learning rather than conceptual learning, memorizing facts, rote learning, cramming like at the last minute. And so because of this, because you're not motivated, naturally you don't want to write the paper. When you have to write a paper, naturally you don't want to do it. It feels like a burden, an obligation, a source of stress. One reason you may be procrastinating is it's a psychological self-defense strategy that your brain is doing to you. Your mind is afraid of a negative outcome. So your mind is playing self-defense. Your mind is saying, I'm not going to do this because I know I'm going to look bad. I'm going to get a bad grade. I'm going to feel bad about myself. So your mind is kind of going on self-defense. No, I don't want to do this. It's a self-defense strategy your brain is doing to you. That could be why you're procrastinating with writing assignments or school assignments. It could be why you're having problems with writer's block. A particularly nasty kind of extrinsic motivation is what we call perfectionism. People often think perfectionism is a good thing, but it's not. It might seem to push you and make you do well in school for a while. You could have kind of a mixed, maybe positive motivation toward most of your classes, but when it comes to grade, you can have a perfectionistic motivation. So a perfectionist is a person who, wants to be perfect, but they have unrealistic expectations of themselves. Now, these could be expectations that other people have imposed upon them and they've internalized, or they've created them themselves. They want to be perfect because they want to get affirmation. I am smart, I'm a good student, therefore I'm worthy of love or respect. This could be because of lack of love or acceptance from parents, or just excessive pressure, academic pressure, educational pressure, work pressure, whatever, that can turn you into a perfectionist. You don't accept yourself for who you are. Instead, you have to attain some level of achievement in order to accept yourself or feel that others will accept you for who you are. But it's not for who you are, it's for what you do. So it's not realistic. And you think, okay, if I'm really smart, I should be able to work to here. So you work hard and you get up to here. So then you think, oh, I should be able to get up to here if I'm really smart. Well, at some point in your life as a perfectionist, you find yourself in a situation where no matter how hard you try, no matter how hard you work, you can't get up to here. Maybe it's just bad circumstances, a really tough class, a really difficult work environment, whatever. You'll find yourself in this kind of situation and you fall into failure mode. No matter how hard you work, you can't get up to there. And then the perfectionist falls into anxiety or depression, maybe writer's block or procrastination. And again, it could be due to excessive pressure in your past. And you have to think about long-term, what are my expectations of myself? What do I expect of myself? Why? where do these expectations come from? What are your expectations for school success, for career success? Where do these expectations come from? Are they right for you? A lot of us have to rethink our expectations of ourselves and our lives because they are not realistic. And we have to have realistic expectations of ourselves. Other similar reasons for why you may lack motivation, especially in a course. Again, excessive educational pressure. Maybe a teacher discouraged you. Maybe you feel bad about your English skills, your writing skills, and it could be because in your past, a language teacher or some other teacher, or maybe a parent or someone else, discouraged you. They made you feel bad, they made you feel dumb, they gave you a lot of negative feedback or criticism, or for some reason they hurt you. So it could be because of this, that you have no motivation, and so you avoid taking challenging classes, you try to avoid assignments by procrastinating, or maybe writer's block, mental blocks, kind of an emotional anxiety block, perhaps. Those could be possible reasons. Maybe you've been a victim of social comparison. Maybe parents or teachers compared you negatively with someone else. Maybe your parents compared you, hey, your brother was really great at math, what's wrong with you? And maybe that's hurt your feelings and turned you into a sort of a perfectionist where you're too focused on achievement and being perfect and looking good. Those are things to think about, especially when it comes to writing or school in general. Because when it comes to school motivation, particular tasks like writing assignments, these things can be paralyzing. Now, short term, you might be able to engage in more careful use of pre-writing techniques or better study techniques. Go for that short term. Long term, though, you need to reflect on yourself. What is it about my past that made me this way? Why do I dislike this so much? Why can't I focus on this? Why do I procrastinate on this? Not because you're lazy, but because of some kind of emotional block from your past. And that's something to think about. And if you have those kinds of problems, I really hope you can reflect on them, maybe talk to somebody about it, at least some friends who have similar struggles, and figure out why that is. And if you're in that kind of situation, I really hope you can reflect on and figure out what it is that made you that way, because just that, being able to name that, what it is that hurt you in the past, that can be liberating once you identify it and you realize how it affected you psychologically and academically. And you can maybe get over that. So if you're in that situation, I really hope you can recover from it and learn to be a successful student. So I wish you the best of luck in getting over these kinds of psychological barriers to learning. Good luck to you. Okay, in this section we are now going to talk about writing strategies. We've talked about the writing process, writing motivation. Now we're going to go deeper into particular strategies, and these are kind of part of your writing process or affect your writing process. I've given you a handout. You've got a PDF handout from my course booklet on writing strategies. So you have a number of questions here, about 2.5 pages of questions. And for each question you fill in, you may not be able to see a blank here. It's kind of 1 for strongly disagree to 5 strongly agree. Fill these out. Fill these out 1 to 5, and so wait before you add them all up. And after you've finished it, here in section 3.3.1 is a scoring key. So it's a little complicated, but you'll then add up these sections or parts of different sections. Sometimes a set of questions is its own kind of subsection. And each of these are going to then translate to certain components of writing strategies. And these components are over here. And we'll talk about what those mean in a few minutes. But I want you to pause the video for a while, This may take about 15 minutes. Pause the video, fill out this inventory, and then add up your scores for these different categories. And by the way, an inventory is kind of like a test, like in psychology or education, for kind of assessing a person's characteristics or traits in a particular area. So this is a writing strategies inventory. So pause the video, fill this out, and we'll come back in a few minutes. All right, let's talk about the results. It's a little complicated, but I find this inventory kind of helpful and useful. The scoring is pretty complicated and weird, and you kind of have to look at the results kind of holistically. You kind of have to compare the numbers. I think I've got the score ranges in here, and you just kind of look at the numbers, compare the number you got compared to the maximum possible score, or compare the numbers to each other and kind of guess what you kind of have to guess what it means. It's not like a 100-point test score where a 90 is an A. You kind of have to look at this, guess from the scores. So the first category is called elaborative voice. That means you focus on expressing and developing and explaining your ideas. As a writer, you're not just dealing with facts, but you're expressing your ideas or your interpretation of facts, your analysis. So you're maybe visualizing or thinking about the audience, the potential readers, and how to communicate to them, how to express your ideas, how to develop your ideas, how to support your ideas with maybe evidence or explanations or details or support in order to persuade the readers. And obviously, this is a very good, healthy writing strategy. If you score relatively high in this, that's good. If you didn't, think about why. Why do you not think about that? Because that actually is kind of the reverse of the procedural, which we'll talk about later. So a good writer is thinking about how to express his or her ideas, how to develop his or her ideas, support them, and reach the reader, how to reach the reader. The next one is low self-efficacy. So self-efficacy is a term in psychology that means your confidence in your ability to effectively learn something new or to do well in a particular task, like a school task, learning a language, or doing well in a course, learning a new skill. So self-efficacy is a healthy thing. It's sort of like your confidence about learning something, but something specific, like English writing, or learning French and becoming fluent in French, or something like that. Your belief in your ability to learn. So if you have high self-efficacy, your study habits and learning habits are generally effective. You're focusing on more successful long-term goals, of learning concepts and ideas, and mastering the material, becoming good at it. If you're low self-efficacy, you're focused more on details, maybe memorizing, less effective study habits. You get lost in the details and you get discouraged because you don't believe in yourself. So this category here is low self-efficacy. So if you get a low score for low efficacy, that's good. That means you have a good sense of efficacy. If you get a high score for low self-efficacy, that means you have a low sense of efficacy, and that's not so healthy. So think about why you got a high or low score in this category. Why do you have a good sense of efficacy, or why do you have a weak sense of efficacy? And weak efficacy might relate to things like perfectionism or low self-esteem. Reflective revision, this is kind of like the elaborative voice. You're focusing on developing and expressing your ideas and your expressions, and a focus on revising and reshaping your paper, your writing. And that's a healthy strategy generally. Spontaneous, impulsive means you just want to get it done. Maybe just, okay, I'll just do it and get it out of the way. I want to get it done. Maybe you do things at the last minute. You procrastinate, you do it at the last minute, you just spit something out. I don't care how bad it is, I'll just spit something out, turn something out, and turn it in. You don't really put much effort or planning into it, not much development of ideas, not much revision, not much planning. Maybe it's written too informally or colloquially. It doesn't look very well planned or well developed, not very good writing. Procedural is kind of the opposite of elaborative voice. You're focusing on the procedures, the things you have to do just to get it done. It's also kind of like the spontaneous, impulsive. And maybe it's concerned with pleasing the teacher or getting a good score, not necessarily learning, but just getting a good grade. And so you focus on observing the rules or what you think the teacher wants, what you think the teacher expects, not necessarily the content or the ideas themselves, but that product. It's just a product you crank out and you do. So you do the procedures you think are required to get something done. Maybe you organize it, but it's kind of superficial, or it's not organized very well at all. So the effective strategies lead to what's called deep writing. You're focusing on what we call metacognitive. You're thinking about what you're doing. You're thinking and strategizing and planning what you're doing. And you're evaluating, am I doing a good job here? Am I expressing my ideas well here? So there's a focus on your planning and your reflection, thinking about yourself. Organization, making meaning clear to people, your audience, communicating to your audience, revising, maybe going beyond just the simple expectations of the assignment and really doing a good job and really learning something, really understanding the stuff and learning from the assignment, not just doing it, but learning from it and going deeper. And that leads to really good papers, really good essays. You go beyond the expectations because you're trying to learn and then really express yourself. You're independent. You're not dependent on the teacher. Teacher, what do we need to do? How can I get an A in this? And so your papers are more coherent, connected, and you get probably a better sense of satisfaction at the end. Feel better about yourself and what you've done. Surface writing, it's mechanical, redundant, maybe repetitive. You focus on little things, not the main ideas or the overall flow or logic or talking to and persuading the reader or giving the reader kind of a sense of satisfaction, like, wow, that was a good paper. You just do what you need to. You focus on little things, maybe grammar, spelling, vocabulary, but not the overall ideas and development of ideas. Maybe less concerned with the audience, maybe dumping in a bunch of data or facts, but not really explaining them and how they support your ideas, your points. Editing minor details, not so much the overall, the global flow and contents. Less focus on contents and more focus on minor details. So not really developing the contents in good detail. You focus on the rules. What do I need to do to get a B plus or a B? Focusing on the rules, not so much the contents or the ideas or the learning experience. You don't focus on the learning experience or what you can get out of it or how you can persuade or communicate something to the reader. So at the end of this handout, there are some questions for you to think about. What do these results mean for you? What do these results tell you about yourself? What do these tell you about your writing and your learning strategies? And do these maybe correlate with your motivation? The motivation that we talked about earlier, do you see a connection between your motivation in writing and these strategies, your scores in these categories for writing strategies? And then based on this lesson, what can you do to improve your writing? How can you improve your writing motivation, your writing strategies, and your writing process? And again, if you have problems with your writing process, your motivation, your strategies, was it because you were taught poorly in the past? Was it because someone in your past hurt your motivation, hurt your feelings about English or writing or yourself, your success? Or someone just pushed you too hard and you focus on success in a way that's not realistic, or a way that's not healthy, in a way that's not really right for you? Are your expectations of yourself realistic? I want you to think about those, and I will probably ask you to fill out another form or two based on this. I might ask you to fill out another little Google form about what you think about this stuff we've talked about, and or I might ask you to fill out a Google form which is just an online version of this strategies inventory. I'll decide and I'll let you know through email or the LMS. Successful students, early successful students in a particular course or major, are those who are going for deeper learning. They are trying to understand deeper issues in the writing. And so their strategies are more elaborative to begin with. They are trying to develop and elaborate on their own ideas. So I'm treating this paper, for example, as my own learning process. I want to learn about the topic, and I want to define my own position in terms of my analysis of this issue or my own opinion on this issue. And then I'm trying to elaborate on and develop and flesh out in detail my understanding or my analysis or my arguments on the topic. That's the elaborative voice. So these students are more interested in elaborating on and developing the contents and ideas in depth. And that tends to go along with the reflective revision approach in writing, especially when it comes to the revision stage, revising papers. And revision is good, and it can be a good thing as long as you're, again, focusing on the global issues. So the effective reflective revision strategy means that in the process of writing and especially revising the paper, you are thinking about the global issues. Are my arguments clear? Would they persuade a typical reader? So I'm not thinking just about the professor with the grading pen in hand. I'm thinking about a potential reader. And am I communicating to a potential reader? Am I either expressing my ideas intelligently, like my analysis or my arguments, in a way that the reader will understand and maybe agree with, or at least the reader will realize I have a valid position here. That's what a good student is trying to get out. They're focusing on, are my ideas and arguments clear? Do I have enough support here? Do I have enough detail to support these ideas? Is the overall flow of thought clear in this paper? Are things basically clear to the reader? So a good writer is thinking about their own ideas and making them clear to the reader. They're focusing on a conceptual understanding and expressing their own analysis or argument at a conceptual level. They're maybe coming up with their own unique analysis or their own unique arguments because they are trying to develop ideas. There's a main point, a thesis, and then supporting arguments or claims in the paper, each of which is probably at least one body paragraph, and each of those is kind of a conceptual claim of some kind. The less effective writer is focused on more surface level details. Instead of trying to understand the topic conceptually, they are maybe just looking up facts on the internet and from sources and rearranging facts. So they are not really identifying their own unique position or analysis, but they are simply repeating and reorganizing factual information, maybe ideas from other people, but they're not really putting their own effort, investing their own effort into it. They are probably what we call low self-efficacy students. So self-efficacy is your sense of your ability to learn and perform an academic task. It is a specific type of self-confidence. You have confidence in your ability to learn and master something in a learning context or an educational context, like a school subject. These students tend to be low self-efficacy, and so they tend to focus more on the easier stuff, the more mechanical stuff. So instead of doing deep revision of ideas, they're focusing more on factual information, rephrasing other people's ideas, and reorganizing it and focusing on things like the grammar and the vocabulary and mechanical issues in writing. Whereas a deeper learner has a high sense of self-efficacy. They have a strong belief in their ability to learn, their ability to do something interesting in a paper. And an effective student, an effective writer, will probably treat a writing task, a writing assignment as a learning opportunity. A low self-efficacy student treats such an assignment as something to do, an obligation, and they probably have a certain sense of displeasure or anxiety about the task because of their low self-confidence. So the writing approach is maybe more spontaneous and impulsive. They may impulsively write something. It's either because they don't trust in their abilities to do this kind of task, or occasionally it could be because they are overconfident about their ability to write, so they start writing at the last minute, something that sounds very informal, colloquial, poorly organized, and they turn it in. So superficial learners tend to engage in more impulsive, less planned work. That is, they do less planning, less careful planning. They do things impulsively. They just write things on paper, and then they reorganize the ideas. So when it comes to the revision process, it's more about just rearranging ideas and focusing on local or minor things like grammar, vocabulary, mechanical aspects like punctuation and spelling and such. Superficial learners are more procedural. Instead of focusing on the learning process, they're just focusing on the procedures, a mechanical approach, in other words. What things do I need to do, 1, 2, 3, to meet the professor's expectations or the minimum requirements of the assignment, or to get a decent grade. They're focused on going through the motions of writing a paper and reorganizing things rather than deeper thought and deeper engagement with the materials. Those are distinctive characteristics of more superficial learners. In our next video, we're going to talk more about motivation issues in writing and academic motivation. But students with low self-efficacy probably are in a sort of a trap because they don't know how to get out of it. They've perhaps lost their motivation for learning, at least in this particular area. And so actually the motivational issues may be the deeper reason behind their poor strategies. So later we'll talk about the essay assignment after you've done these various Google Forms and I have a chance to reply to you and give you some feedback. Things are a little bit crazy right now, just moving into my new job, my new office, and new place and all that. But it's nice to be here. So until next week, good luck. Have a nice weekend. See you later. Okay, so we have talked today in this first hour, the first lesson, about your motivation, and there is a little form for you to do about motivation. And next we're going to talk about writing strategies. So in this section, we're going to look more in detail about your actual strategies when it comes to writing and writing assignments. And again, this may depend on the kind of writing, the kind of class that you're doing. It may depend on which language you're doing writing in.